Hey, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah Sperber and I am a realtor in the Northern Nevada market. And on today's video, as I do each and every month, I'm going to be giving you a data deep dive. The metrics have just published in our market for the recap of the month of December. I'm going to dive into all of that. I'll give you some of my best advice and, of course, offer some predictions as we move forward. So make sure you stay till the end and don't you go anywhere. I do need to preface this video by telling you guys that these metrics are just for Reno and Sparks, although I do serve everything in our MLS, which is most of the northwestern part of Nevada. So if you have other questions about other places like Carson, Genoa, Minden, Gardnerville, Dayton, Fallon, Fernley, any of our surrounding areas, I would be more than happy to guide you and give you any data or any kind of insight you need about the real estate markets in more specific locations. All right, without further ado, let's dive in. There are a couple metrics here that really surprised me. The first of which is our median sales price, which despite the holidays and everything else did increase. The increase was marginal. It only went up by 2.2% month over month, landing at $595,000. This is a 6.3% increase year over year. I guess it's not that surprising, even though the market has slowed in pace significantly as these cooler months have kind of taken hold. Prices have continued to hold strong, and that's kind of been a theme in our market for a long time, which means that even if it is a long game, real estate continues to be an investment that is obviously worth having in your portfolio, whether it's just being a homeowner or if you are an investor. Obviously, there are so many benefits there. But overall, we are seeing the median sales price increasing. Number of closed sales did increase, and actually this surprised me, and I'm going to tell you why, but it increased by 3% month over month and 25.8% year over year. That's a huge difference from one year to the next, landing at 341 closed sales. Now, the reason this surprises me is obviously because as the months kind of cool down into winter, we get into Thanksgiving and then all the way through Christmas and New Year's, we do tend to see that the market kind of comes to a standstill. So I was predicting that if we looked back at December in arrears, that we were going to see kind of like a much slower pace, and there is some of that here, but I was definitely expecting that the number of closed sales would have gone down, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes I'm wrong. But one thing to keep in mind and one caveat with that is that these are lagging metrics, right? So obviously when we look at a month in arrears, the houses that have sold, so we're looking at number of closed sales, that number is kind of giving you a snapshot into what was happening roughly 30 days prior. Even though number of closed sales for December increased, we can maybe assume that this number will go down another month in arrears, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, or if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment. I respond to each and every comment. I would love to give you any guidance or help clarify any of this. Okay, this next KPI is absolutely one that I was expecting, and that is median days to contract. If you don't know what that means, it means the amount of time that it takes from when a listing goes live to when an offer is accepted. And so we're not talking about average, we are talking about median. So that number drastically increased month over month by 69%. I think that might be the biggest change I've seen for this metric ever. So that tells you something. Not only that, but it increased by more than 27% year over year. So that's telling you that houses are sitting much longer than they were before, almost 70% longer than they were before. This number landed at 49 days. So our median time that you can expect, like middle of the ground, pricing and, kind of like median sales price home, you can expect that in Reno and Sparks, the median amount of time it's going to sit before it gets an offer is 49 days. Some of that is due in part to mortgage interest rates being a lot higher than we would have anticipated. Part of it is due to the fact that it was an election year this past year, so a lot of people put their plans on hold and kind of wanted to see which way that was going to shake out. And then with all those factors in play, it's not surprising that the market is kind of moving at a slower pace. Okay, percent of list price received. If you guys have been watching me for a while, you know that I always say that this metric is the one that like barely ever changes. And literally, it really doesn't. Like, we are at 98.2%. So basically, in other words, if a listing is priced appropriately, more often than not, sellers are getting pretty dang close to what they are asking. But that is a big if. And pricing a listing can be very tricky depending on what comps are available. It can also depend a lot on a seller's unique situation, their margins. So it's not always just super simple to price a listing and get it right. Obviously, that's why you hire a professional who will bring in adequate data, do adequate research, and make sure that they are being very strategic with pricing. So make sure that you have that for sure. Percent of list price received did increase, but ever so slightly year over year by less than 1%. It was only 0.2%. So like I keep telling you guys, that number very seldom changes. I think it's always between like 97 and 100% of asking price. Median sold price per square foot. So we're not talking about asking price, we're talking about what it actually sold for here. This decreased by less than 1%. By 0.3%, you guys, that's really marginal. They do give us this data by median and not by average. And so a 0.3% fluctuation really doesn't mean a whole lot. That said, it did increase by 7.6% year over year. Number of new listings took a steep nosedive, and I'm not surprised, and I will tell you why, but first let's talk about the numbers. This metric landed at 223 new listings, which is a 35.5% decrease month over month and a 10.4% increase year over year. If you can't afford to wait, it's honestly not the best time to be listing your house. I personally have multiple listing agreements already signed with some sellers that are not going to be going live until February, simply because I don't feel like it's in their best interest. And I feel like the market is going to strengthen once we get out of this like holiday slump. And it's already picking up. I can tell you guys on the ground, I'm seeing a lot more activities. All my listings are getting a lot more showing requests this week. Last week and the week before were pretty dead. I think we're turning a new leaf. There's momentum building in our market. And I predict, and I will get into more of this, but I do predict that by February, we may be in a totally different scenario here. Let's talk about active inventory. So we just talked about number of new listings. Now we're going to talk about what is still active, and that landed at 737 listings for Reno and Sparks. This is a 21.3% decrease month over month and a 19.6% increase year over year. I think what we can conclude from these two numbers combined is that the lack of new inventory in our market is kind of forcing and corralling buyers to explore inventory that was already there, right? Active inventory. And so without new listings coming on the market, the inventory that was active is kind of getting purchased. It's good news for the listings that have been sitting. That said, I do think that a lot of people are waiting to get through this January slump, and I do think that we're going to see a lot more competition on the seller side, but I'm going to get to that. I have one last number to share with you, and then we'll get into the analysis of this, so don't go anywhere. Okay. Months supply of inventory. If you aren't aware, this number is talking about how long it would take if there were no new listings that came into our market. How long would it take for the current inventory to be absorbed? And that number is 2.2 months. This is a 23.7% decrease month over month and a 4.9% decrease year over year. Here's what you've been waiting for, is that if you are thinking about selling right now, it is a good time to be ramping up. As I mentioned throughout this video, I do think that we're going to see even stronger buyer activity come early spring or at least late winter, like in the February months and onward. I think we are going to start to see things picking up and turning around. On the ground, I'm already seeing a lot more buyer activity, But at the moment, and based on this data, there is still a huge lack of inventory. This is a problem that we've had in our market for several years, but I think that we are really feeling it. And I think that this moment, like right after the holidays, right before the market becomes alive again, is where you kind of have this sweet spot opportunity as a seller, because you're not necessarily competing with as many listings on the market, and we're starting to see buyers re-enter the market, and it seems like many of them are ready to play ball. So that is good news if you are thinking about selling. For buyers, our market does remain competitive, although I do want to remind you about our median days to contract, right? Properties are sitting median, not average, but a median timeline of 49 days before getting an offer accepted. So you have time to get your financing in order. You have time to kind of, tour a bunch of homes, think about what you saw. It's not this like cutthroat, like if you don't snag it, someone else will, like right out from under you necessarily. You never know. I always say that, and then of course it happens. But you want to be prepared always. I always say enter the market with your best foot forward, whether you're buying or selling, because these are big decisions, right? And so you want to have clarity no matter what side you are on. And in most cases, unless you're buying your first house or selling your last house, you're usually on both sides of the transaction at once. I think one thing that needs to be said is that the median sales price has once again increased, which is a testament to our overall local housing market, local economy, and the strength of our market here. And that despite all conditions, all, rates and elections and holidays and just all the chaos that has kind of ensued in the past 2+ years in real estate now, we have continued to grow. Reno remains a very favorable place for many people moving here. And so if that is on the horizon for you, I would love to be a resource for you. If you're thinking about buying or selling, I would also be a resource for you. You can book a free call with me. There's a link to do that in the description box below. It's no obligation, just a chance to connect, see if we might be a good fit to work together. And at the very least, I'll get all your questions answered and help you devise a strategy with your next and best steps. All right, you guys, if you haven't already, it would mean the absolute world to me if you would smash that like and that subscribe button. I just got monetized on YouTube after 3 years of talking about market data and all things real estate related. So I'm celebrating you, and thank you so much. And I will see you guys next week. I put out videos every week about the Reno Sparks housing market, the Northern Nevada lifestyle, and all things to do with buying and selling real estate. Thank you so much. See you next time.